You found it. Your home for the best content on your favorite team, the Fighting Tigers of LSU. Do us a favor. Subscribe to the channel. Leave your comments below. Be sure to smash that like button. All right, NFL Combine begins this week up in Indianapolis, and LSU is going to have a very heavy presence there. 9 Tigers were invited to the scouting combine. They are Damon Clark, Chasen Hines, of course, Derek Stingley will be there, Neil Farrell Jr., Cade York, Cordell Flott, Ty Davis-Price, Ed Ingram, and Austin Deculus. So the story, the news today, is that Derek Stingley Jr. will not work out at the combine. He's not alone. It's become more and more in vogue for guys to just work out at their pro day and not work out at the combine. As we've talked about for years here, and we've had so many people from trainers and coaches and players who have said over and over routinely on the air, the most important part of the combine, medical and the interview. That's really it. You have 32 orthopedics that pull and poke and prod and tug and exam every part of your body to make sure that physically you're able, based on the investment that a team is going to make in you. And then you have the teams that actually sit down and talk to you where you can explain things and that maybe are stories that have been a part of your past. And it's your opportunity to speak openly with every team there. It's a gigantic job interview. So Derek Stingley, he had the Liz Frank injury. He had surgery on it. He's not 100% according to this report from Ian Rappaport. So because he's not 100%, he's not going to work out. He'll work out at LSU's Pro Day coming up in April, on April the 6th. So I was looking at it from an LSU perspective of who has the most to gain or lose at the Combine this week. And, I think the one with the most to lose is obviously Derek Stingley. He's a projected top 10 pick, has been for his entire career. He's, in the eyes of many in a mock draft, dropped some from where we saw him as high as maybe 4 to somewhere in or just outside of the top 10. That's costly because every spot you drop with slotted values in the NFL draft costs you about $1 million. So if you go from 4 to 10, that's cost you $6 million. If you go from 4 to 12, that's cost you $8 million. Every spot you drop, it's cost you money. So obviously, if Derek Stingley continues to fall because of whatever happens this week in Indianapolis, then that he's got the most to lose financially. I don't think there's any question. But I think there are 3 LSU players that have a ton to gain this week. And they're Damon Clark, Cordell Flott, and Ed Ingram. I'll tell you why. Each of those guys right now is projected, well, maybe not Ingram. I'm going to be interested on Ed. But the other 2 are projected to be taken inside of the top 100. Damon Clark right now is on everybody's board as a second-round pick. If Damon Clark goes to Indy and runs a great time, he'll test out fine on the physical. He was very healthy during his LSU career. And if he does well in the interviews, and this is a guy that wore the 18 jersey, he was a team leader. Damon Clark has, in my opinion, the most to gain. I think Damon Clark, because of the tape he put out this last year, because of all of the intangibles, if he goes to Indy and aces it, he aces the interviews, runs a great 40 time, I think Damon Clark can be a first-round pick. If the right team falls in love with him, they could reach and grab him at the end of round 1, similar to what happened with Kansas City and Clyde taking him with the last pick of round 1. I think that's a very real possibility for Damon. For what it's worth, when Damon Clark was coming out of high school, his 40 time, according to 247 Sports, when he was coming out of high school, was 4.98. 4.98. Nearly a 5 flat. That's a linebacker, okay? But that was 4 years ago. What does Damon Clark run? I think that's going to be massively significant. I mean, the thing that made Devin White a top 5 pick was the fact that he ran like a running back. I mean, when you're as big as that dude is, big and fast and physical, and you run a 4.4, I mean, you blow people's minds. I don't think Damon Clark's going to run that, but can he run a time that's going to open people's eyes to say, okay, he's physical, he's a thumper, he can play in coverage, he's a 3-down linebacker, and he's fast? Yeah, I think that Damon Clark has a ton to gain. I would say the same for Cordell Flott. Flott might well be the surprise of the combine. Because I think Cordell Flott's a guy that's going to go, and when they do all the measurables, right? Your arm length, your height, the wingspan, your hand size, all that stuff that teams seemingly go gaga over for whatever reason. Cordell Flott is going to be a guy that is off the charts with all those measurements. They're going to look at him and go, this guy's a pterodactyl. Pro Football Focus rated him as the best slot cornerback in college football at the midway point. And then, of course, LSU had some injuries. They lost Stingley and Ricks, and then they moved Flott outside, so that changed a bit. But Pro Football Focus also had Cordell Flott as a fourth-team All-American. So they were bullish. There have been those that have gotten it, that have caught on to what Cordell Flott is and what he can be. And if he's a guy that proves he can play both the nickel and the boundary, he's basically Paulson Adebo. And before the COVID year, Paulson Adebo was a projected first-round pick. By some, he opted out the COVID year and then obviously fell in the draft. But Flott's a guy that could see that same elevation. I think Cordell Flott very well could be a day 2 pick, round 2 or 3, and I wouldn't be surprised with a great combine that he races up some of those boards. And Ed Ingram, for me, is the giant question mark. Because Ed physically is as good an interior lineman as LSU has had, but he battled a lot within his career, right? He had the accusations against him in his hometown. He missed a year and a half, proved that they were unfounded. All the charges were dropped. He was just a stand-up guy about all of it, never complained, worked, could have left after last year, decided to come back for another year, had sort of a down first half, was really good the second half of the season. And I think Ed Ingram's one of those guys that could go to the draft and answer the off-the-field questions. And people may say, yeah, this is a guy this is a 10-year starter in the NFL at a guard spot. And I think he very much could be. I think Trey Turner, who went round 3, when he came out after a sophomore, he was a draft-eligible sophomore. I think Ed Ingram, it could be taken in a similar spot where you see a guy that's a top 100 pick. I think if I'm looking at it, man, Damon Clark, Cordell Flott, Ed Ingram, I think have the most to gain this week in Indy. So the rest of the guys, Chasen Hines, Neil Farrell, Cade York, Ty Davis Price, Austin Deculus, I think they're going there just hoping for a shot to get drafted, to hear their name called. Cade York likely will. Someone will likely pull the trigger on York. But I don't know that those other guys have a tremendous amount of room to move into day 1 or 2. It's basically just, can they get to a point where they hear their name called? And this week is big for them. But the 3 that I think have the most to gain, Clark, Flott, Ingram. Most to lose, obviously, is Stingley because he's sitting at the highest perch. So busy week for all these guys. Gigantic job interview. Wishing them all well there this week in Indy. Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact. And be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.